We're looking at the identity that we have and the messages that we get. One of the key identity messages that comes to us has to do with acceptance. So if we imagine that down here is a plane of rejection, we don't want to be rejected, we'd like to be accepted. And here's the mountain that we have to climb to get someone else's acceptance. And this is a game that's often played in relationships between parents and children, or between your own friends, between husbands and wives. And it goes like this. If you'll keep rule number 1 and keep your room clean, I'll love and accept you. So you keep rule number 1, but you don't get love and acceptance. Instead, you get rule number 2, let me pick your friends. So you say, all right, I'll go along with that. You come up here and you keep rule number 2. And then what you see instead of love and acceptance is another rule, and then a tendency for people to do this to you. Well, at that, someone will say, well, blow this. I'm not going to go ahead and live trying to get your acceptance when I can't. I'd rather live down here in rejection and not climb any longer, not play the game. And to show you how mad and upset I am about it, I'm going to break all the rules that you told me that I needed to keep. So we see people performing to get the acceptance from others, but they never can get it. And in the end, they just give up and quit and jump. They get the idea that they'll never arrive and they'll never be good enough. A fellow I know said this to me. He says, listen, I'm leaving my wife. I've been with her, I forget, 20-some years. And he said, the death sentence is only 25. He said, I could have served that and been out. I can't please her. I can't make her happy. It doesn't matter how much I do, it's never going to be enough, and in the end, he just jumps. Now, we come under that in relationships, and it's just called performance-based acceptance. If I divide you in two, and on one side I put who you are, and on the other side I put what you do, and we pick all the relationships that you have, mom, dad, brothers, sisters, grandparents, church, friends, all of those. Why do people accept you? Because of who you are or what you do? Where are you accepted? Well, it's easy to find out. Turn to the person next to you and spit on them. Now, how many people are going to say this? Oh, bless you. I'm so happy that I sat by you this morning. Is that what people are going to say? They're going to reject you. Ultimately, you get rejected because of what you do. And here's the little game that we play. If you'll do A, B, and C, just as I tell you, they're all positives, I'll love and accept you. But when you do A, B, and C, do you get love and acceptance? No, you get D, E, and F. And when you do a minus, here's how people react to you. That's all right, honey, that you forgot to pick me up in the rain and the snow. Oh, that's okay. And it's all right that when you drove by, you didn't look at me or notice me and you thought I'd left. And it's okay that I sat out here wet, because after all, you've taken care of me, you've had my babies, you've cleaned for me, you've cooked. Isn't that the response you get from your husband when you forget him? No. The one minus cancels all of the positives and you get rejected. When it comes to my relationship with God, then, how do I assume I'm accepted by God if this is how all my earthly relationships are? Does he accept me because of what I do or who I am? What do we feel that he accepts us by? On what basis? It's what we do. That's what every other relationship has been. And when we believe it's by what we do, we have a little invisible pair of glasses. We put them on one lens is written do, on the other lens is written do, and we open the Bible and all we see is do-do. And you've got to do this, and you have to do that, and do this, and do that, and we have a lot of lists. If we finally keep the list, God's going to accept me. If in all my relationships down here, I do, and one minus cancels them all, as I start to do for God, as soon as I have one failure, what do? I run. I don't even wait to hear from him. I don't even wait to see what God's going to say to me. But here's the difference. My relationship with God is not based on what I do, but it's based on birth. If you believe that your relationship with him is based on what you do, you're going to have a miserable experience and a miserable Christian life. Because Galatians makes it clear that when we base our relationship on what we do, then we set Christ aside and we come under the law. And here's what Isaiah 28:12 and 13 says. The Lord said, "This is a resting place, let the weary rest, and this is a place of repose." But they would not listen. They didn't want to rest. They wanted to build a relationship in their own effort, not in the efforts of God. And so he said, here's the word of the Lord to you. Do on do, do on do. Rule on rule, rule on rule. A little here and a little there, so that you'll fall back, go backwards, be injured, snared, and captured. Our relationship with God is not based on what we do. If you believe it is, he'll just let you fail until you figure out it's based on who he is and what he does. It's based on a new birth in Christ. The day you asked Christ into your life, maybe nobody told you this, you became something you never were before. You are now a child of God, and acceptance is based on that. So imagine this. The neighbor kids are perfect angels. When they walk on the snow, they don't even leave footprints. They bless everyone. They help the little old ladies across the street. They're wonderful kids, and my kids are brats. They spit on people, they throw rocks, they throw spit wads, they're always in trouble, all of those kind of things. The neighbor kids and my kids are playing in the front yard. Who gets invited in to have tea, take a bath, and go to bed? Who do I invite in? Who do I invite? Yeah, I'd like to invite the neighbor kids, but I can't, because that's kidnapping. I have to invite my kids because they're my kids, and their behavior isn't what makes them a kid. How would you like to go to your father every day and say, well, have I measured up yet? Am I acceptable enough yet to be a part of this family? It's by birth that you're brought into the family. So I had a fellow who was in my office. He owns the building, or used to own it. He sold it now. He was a fellow from Germany, and he'd made his millions in the U.S. He comes in the office one day, and he's supposedly going to tell me what or ask me what I believe, but in the end he's just telling me what he believes. And he believes that when we die, we become a spark of energy, float around the universe, blah, blah, blah. So he gets ready to leave, and I said, listen, I really appreciate you coming. It's been great talking to you. You've helped me a lot. He says, well, how did I help you? I told him, well, it's embarrassing, but I'm a bit of a bigot. I see that there's bigotries in my life, and God always brings someone to tear down bigotries. And I thought I had very few left, but he keeps bringing them. And I said, you tore down a bigotry today, so I really appreciate it. He says, what was the bigotry? And I said, you're going to laugh, but I thought all Germans were smart until I talked to you. Well, I knew he wouldn't leave then because he's such a dominant doer type guy. And so he said, well, what I hate about you Christians is you think everyone's going to hell but you. But everyone is going to hell but me. That's what I told him. That's true. That's a fact. So here's what he says. You've got 2 chairs in your office. I know a fella who works for me who says he's a Christian, goes to church, but I happen to know he's a closet alcoholic and he's been seen at a porno store. I know another fellow who's an atheist who people think is wonderful, and he gives $500,000 a year to relief effort. I'm going to bring them both to your office, and I want you to explain to them why the fellow who's a closet alcoholic goes to heaven and the fellow that gives $500,000 a year and doesn't do anything wrong goes to hell. Isn't that a good question? It's a good question. I looked at him and I said, well, that's easy. You've got a son that works for you that never does any work. He said, yeah, that's a problem. I said, he's also finishing his 3rd marriage. He says, yeah, I know. I said, the thing is, you sent him to university and he quit with 1 semester left. He said, what's your point? I said, my point is I'm better than him. I work all the time. I finish school. I'm still in my 1st marriage. I'm better than your son. He says, well, you might be. And I said, no, might be. I'm going to argue with you. I really believe that I'm better than your son, and we're going to argue this point until I prove it. I'm better than him. Finally, he gets mad and he goes, all right, you're better than him. What's that mean? Well, what it means is I want you to go to your solicitor this afternoon and change your will and leave everything to me. I'll have the building, I'll have the Benz, I'll have the properties, you leave it all to me. And he looked at me and said, I wouldn't give you squat. I said, why? He says, I don't care how good you are, you're not my son. I said, now you've answered your own question. I don't care how good this fellow is, he's not a child of God. I'll cast my lot with my brother. I don't care if he is an alcoholic. He's acceptable to God not by his behavior but his birth. And now we'll begin to work and we'll walk out of that and we'll see God move in that. But acceptance is based not in what I do but who I am. When we've gotten all the messages from others that say I'm unacceptable and it's based on performance, we think it's that way with God, but it isn't that way with God. It comes through birth. Now, I want to show you how this identity affects us. So we'll go to that diagram, page 26. Let's just pick a problem. And there's a lot of problems that we have, but we can think of the one problem, that one thing that keeps recurring, that if God would get rid of it, I'd be perfectly happy and I could serve him perfectly. So there's heaps of problems that we can look at. We can always, take a cheap shot and just pick on the drunks and say that's their problem, they drink. We could take a look at the people that are on drugs. What about the people that withdraw under pressure? The people that are just addicted to television, to videos, to food, to passivity, to depression. Any of those can be problems. Now, if our problem is really the problem, then I need to give you some medication so you'll be happy all the time. I need to get you active. I need to sew up your lips so you can't eat. Maybe take out your eyes so you don't watch your videos anymore. Give you some medication so when you drink you get sick and then you can be a sick drunk. There's a lot of things I could do to fix your problem if the problem is the real issue. But what people normally will say to you is there was an event that caused my problem. Somebody said to me, I made a mistake marrying you. I made a mistake being your friend. I made a mistake dating you. I made a mistake rooming with you. I made a mistake hiring you. So the real reason that I'm having my problem is that somebody said something mean to me. And here's what the counselors will tell you next then. Well, then you need to find a wife that never says anything mean. That's terrible that somebody said something negative to you. Find a roommate that would never say a minus. That's what you've got to do. Find a husband that never says a minus. Where are the husbands that never say anything negative? Where are the people who never say a minus to you? I don't really think that they exist. We all end up doing that and saying a minus. Now, for a Christian to have a problem, they have to rebel against God. You fall out with God before you ever fall into sin. And so we begin to obsess on our sin, but our sin isn't the problem. You fell out with God before you ever fell into sin. And somehow you have to justify your falling out with God because you're in rebellion. The only thing that makes you feel good about rebellion is anger. Anger justifies rebellion. So if I get angry, I can justify what I'm doing. And if you'll notice, every time that you fall into your little problem that you have, you're mad when you do it. Anger justifies what you're doing. Whenever you see a teenager getting angry, you know they're fixing to rebel against you. They're just working up their courage so they can justify doing something on the weekend they know they shouldn't be doing. But we all do it. We all get angry to justify our rebellion. So I say to Betty, Betty, I'm on a diet. You've got to help me with my diet. What can you do about my diet? I'm going to kill myself if I don't get on a good diet. I'm traveling all the time. You need to work on my diet. So she gets busy with it. She makes a list, everything you can do. Now, one of the things that Betty does for me is she puts me on plenty of vitamins. I got more vitamins than you can imagine. If you don't believe me, I'll show them to you. I got these little rounds upstairs. I have 3 of them with 10 vitamins in each thing. And I don't know what they are. I don't know what they do. I just accept the fact that I'm supposed to be taking all these vitamins. And I don't like the vitamin stores in the U.S. There's something about them. You go in there, she drags you around there. There's people with hair hanging out of their ears down to here, old tennis shoes, free Cuba t-shirts. It's just weird. But anyway, I go in the vitamin store with her, and we get all these. She used to work in a health food store, and I'm taking my vitamins, and then she puts me on a diet. So in the morning, you get oatmeal, and then what we called that on the farm is Blue John. It's not really milk. I figured out how they make it. They take gallon jugs of water and they pass a cow in front of it. And then they label it milk, but there's no milk in it. In fact, one time I just went ahead and put water on to see if it made any difference. It doesn't make any difference. There's nothing in that. So you have your oatmeal with the Blue John on it, and you eat that. I'm on my diet, and you get a handful of vitamins, and you take that down. Then you come home for lunch, and you get a little piece of lettuce that you can't find the other side of it, and then a half a peach, not in any sweet stuff either, it's just a peach. And you eat that, and I'm on my diet, more vitamins. Thanks for the vitamins, Betty. And I head to work, and I'm working away, and at 3 o'clock, there's this little voice. Dunkin' Donuts. Dunkin' Donut. Where did that come from? Dunkin' Donuts. And then it goes on. Half price sale, 3 o'clock. Day-old half-price donuts, 3 o'clock. Dunkin', can't do that. I've got to stay in there, so I'm on this diet. I got to do it. I got to keep. If I ate a donut right now with all these vitamins, I'd just roll over like a slug in salt. I don't know what had happened to me. Can't do it. And you sit there, and you get madder and madder. How does she think I can live like this? You can't eat a peach and a piece of lettuce. You can't do that. And all of a sudden, you get in the car, and you're driving over. Now, it's a bad sign when you step in the door and everyone there turns around and goes, "Hi, Mike." You know you've been there too much. Well, how many you want? I'll just take a whole dozen. And you get in the car and you start, who does she think she is giving me these vitamins? And you pound them down. Then you go home at night and she says, "You ready for the other peach and lettuce?" "Oh, no, the diet's really working well. I'm doing just fine on it." We justify our rebellion through our anger. No matter what it is, it makes me feel good about it. Now, here's the question. Why is it when one fellow's wife says to him, "I made a mistake marrying you," he runs out and gets drunk, and another fellow's wife says, "I made a mistake marrying you," and he goes out and works in the garden? What's the difference between the two? My wife works all the time. She works flat out, runs things, administers the whole thing for me, has a stack of work like this to do all the time. Sometimes I just feel guilty when I see her out there shoveling the snow on top of all the other stuff she does. I just watch. But the thing is, she's flat out. I come back from Russia, and I've got a stack of work for her to do, but I've already given her 3 stacks. My office is next to hers, so it's kind of a joke. I put all the stuff on the floor and pushed it towards her with a stick and then slammed the door. Well, pretty soon she comes in and she says, "How can I get all of this done? You're giving me too much stuff. Look at everything that you generate." And I put my arms around her and I hugged her and I said, "Let's pray. Father, please reveal to Betty what a blessing it is to be married to me. Just what a choice fellow I am. Just how lucky she is. Just show her that no one would ever love her the way I love her." And I kept holding her and going on, and pretty soon she started laughing. She says, "In between being annoying, we have a lot of fun." Why is it that we can respond when someone says, "I made a mistake," someone's angry at us? Why don't we respond in love instead of reacting? Well, here's why. If we take everything that we are at our worst moment, our worst identity, all of this, we take everything we are at our worst, we feel unlovable and unwanted, and so we put that in here. I feel unwanted and unlovable. Whenever an event takes place that proves I'm the very thing I've been working so hard to cover up, See, this is my identity, and I've been working to cover it up with my success. See, whenever an event takes place that proves I'm the very thing I was working so hard to cover up, I'm stripped naked, and this is how I cope with my nakedness. I'm always controlled by events because they prove my identity. So here's the analogy. Imagine this. Right now, soldiers march into the room. They line the room. They point their guns at us, and they say this. Everybody here has to stand up, take off your clothes, and you have to walk to town naked. Now, what would be the responses you'd see in this room? You could have the odd person out, I suppose, that says, well, I've always looked for an opportunity. This is really going to be exciting. You can have the odd person out like that. You might also have the person that just says, kill me. Just kill me. I'm not going to take off my clothes. Some people would get drunk and it feels good not to have any clothes. It's nice to get rid of them. You would see some people that as you looked at them naked, they would go into a rage and scream and yell at you and reject you in such a way you don't even want to look at them naked. You just turn your head. Then you have people who are the ones that withdraw. Well, I'm going to hide behind this chair. I'm going to hide behind the bush. I'll get in the hedges. I'll stay there till dark. I'll work my way home. I'll get there. No one will ever see me the way I really am. Now, the most common thing you'd see is probably what I would do. I'd just get depressed. Well, I never deserved any clothes anyway. I'm surprised I had them as long as I did. And then I just head down the road, just completely depressed, and you pull up alongside me and they go, Mike, is that you? Yeah, and I don't have no clothes either. And I just go on and on and on in just this depressed funk because finally events have proven what I really am. And that's how I'm going to cope with my nakedness. What if, just what if, we could get rid of this? What if we could get rid of this? And we could give you a new life, a new identity that was wanted and loved. If we could do that, then the event wouldn't bother me. I wouldn't have to be undone by it. And if the event didn't bother me, I wouldn't need to rebel. And if I don't need to rebel, then I wouldn't need to get angry. And therefore, I wouldn't need to do any of this. And I would stop these things naturally. I would naturally stop all of that. Well, that's where we're headed. I'm not going to tell you how. But what we want to do is go to the root rot. Now, the last diagram in terms of identity is on page 28. Here's the thing I want to look at. Let's imagine this is boy A and this is boy B. The worst thing that ever happened to boy B is he was spanked in the hospital when he was born. So he thinks it's a mean world. The worst thing that ever happened to boy A is he doesn't even know who his father is. His anxiety's at 50% and his is at 5%. Now, the most anxiety anyone can handle is 100%. Once they reach 100%, they blow a gasket. They explode. They can't handle any more. So this boy starts out life at 5, and this one starts at 50. He was spanked. He doesn't know who his father is. Both of them are in high school, and they're dating a girl, and this girl dumps him. And that's a 5% event. His anxiety goes to 10%. His depression, worry, doubts, and fears goes up to 10. But he thinks about it a while and says, well, you know, there's a lot of other girls I could date. Wouldn't mind dating them. That's not such a bad deal. This fellow, though, has his girlfriend dumping. And since he's feeling worthless, unacceptable, no good, full of anxiety at a 50, what's a 5% event for him is a 20% event for this boy. He's just had an event that proves what he was always feeling. I'm amazed at the people that do this. They sit in my office and they say this. A girl will say this to me. I need to break up with that boy. It's a stupid relationship. I shouldn't be in it. I've got a list of what a relationship ought to give you. He meets none of it. I'm going to break up with him. I said, well, good on you. So she goes out with him that night, And he looks across the table, and before she can say, I'm breaking up with you, he says, well, I'm breaking up with you. Now, what do you think her response is? Big relief. Oh, good, I don't have to say anything. Please don't. And she's trying to hang on to him. It's unbelievable to watch it. The only reason she's trying to hang on is he beat her to the punch. We don't like the rejection that's proving what I'm feeling down here. So we try to hang on to avoid it. So we have somebody that's at a 50 and now they go to 70. When you get married, that adds 25% anxiety to anybody's life. So he goes to 35 and somebody just ran out of room. That's why the person you married may not be the person you married. And here's the dangerous thing. Life is full of 6% events. You don't get the job, you get a flat tire, your car breaks down, somebody yells at you, you have some depression to deal with, all of those kind of things. They're 6% events. So I'm sitting on the front porch. I watch my neighbors come out. Both of them have a flat tire. Boy B's anxiety goes to 41%. It's a 6% event, a flat tire. He looks at it, he waves at me, kind of laughs, says, well, I need to get going on this. Better get my hands dirty, get this fixed. He goes back down. I look at boy A, though. He sees his flat tire, goes in and starts accusing the wife and kids for causing the flat. Then he comes out with his tire wrench and goes around the around the car beating it. He just blew over the top. And here's the deception. We think the 6% event is the problem. But it's not the problem. It's not the 6% event. And if only people talked to me better, and only if people were nicer to me, and only if things worked out, and all this, I could stay at a comfortable 95%. I know a fellow who, one time at one of our men's retreats, got up to share, and he says this, it's sure great to be up here with you men unwinding. I haven't been this loose in years. Someone needs to hold me down. This is so loose here. And that's how he's talking to us. And I think, well, what would he be like if he was wound up? He's lived so long at a 95 that he actually believes that a 95 is normal. And we think then that the events are creating our problems. And it's not. Now, I keep this here for one reason, to remind me of something. You seen the bumper sticker that says, Jesus is coming and this time he's mad? See, he is going to return, and when he returns, he'll be judging. But I'm not excited about God judging people. Ezekiel 33:11 says this, I take no pleasure in the death of the wicked. Now, if he takes no pleasure in the death of the wicked, then Mike Wells takes no pleasure in the death of the wicked. I don't have any pleasure in that. And here's what this reminds me of. I look at another person and I think this. If I had happened to me what happened to them, if I had the identity messages that they had, would I be coping as well as they are? If I had that person's past, would I be doing as well as they're doing? When I see the fellow pushing the grocery cart, carrying the bottle of wine, he has everything he owns in it, and I mock him and laugh at him and make fun of him, I just want to know this. If I had happened to me what happened to him, would I be doing as well as he's doing? I don't want to judge anybody. I don't want to judge my parents. I don't want to judge those around me, because I don't know what went on in their life and pushed them this way. I remember a fellow who was hooked on pornography. It was an addiction. And an addiction is a lot different than a habit. An addiction is a habit that becomes a person. It's personalized. And it calls you all the time on the phone to your mind. And so what happens is a person's hooked on pornography, and or cocaine, whatever it is. He's working at work, and all of a sudden at 10 o'clock, his girlfriend, cocaine, his girlfriend, pornography, whatever it is, makes a phone call to his mind. Why don't you meet me tonight? I'll take away all your pain. I'll give you pleasure. Just meet with me. And the fellow says, no, I'm not meeting with you. I met with you last night. You're a rough date. I don't want anything to do with you. So he hangs up the phone. And then at noon, his wife calls him. She's upset. She's mad about this, mad about that. As soon as he hangs up the phone, there's a phone call up here. Why don't you meet with me? I'll be your girlfriend. I'll take away all your pain. I'll be with... No, I'm not meeting with you. Then around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, the boss is mad. And this relationship we have going on with a habit makes a phone call. Why don't you meet with me? And finally the fellow says, yeah, I'll meet with you. Now, to make sure you never break up with your addiction, as soon as you meet with it, it turns right around and tells you what a no-hoper you are forever coming. Forever meeting with it. It turns right around and says you're hopeless, you're worthless, you're stupid, to make you feel more of those things so you'll be sure and meet with it the next day. And some people need to break up with their girlfriend. Even suicide becomes an addiction. And it's an illicit lover. And people spend a lot of time with suicide, and they meet with it, and they talk with it, and it makes phone calls to their mind, and it says, if you just meet with me, I'll take away all your pain. We look at people with addictions, and we go, gee, what a mess. But if you had their past, would you be doing better than them? If you knew, like I knew, that this poor boy had been molested when he was smaller, would you be mocking him for where he's at? The thing is, we don't want to judge people, because if we judge people, we will always judge them wrongly. I was asking a friend of ours, Arthur Burke, an old man. He doesn't act old, but he is. One night in Wales, brother, how come people begin well, but they don't end well? And he says, well, let me show you. And he puts a pen down on the table. And then this pen comes over. He says, who's holding this pen? I said, you are. He says, whose strength is it? I said, it's yours. Well, who gets the credit? I said, you get the credit. You're holding the pen. Well, he says, put your ear down by that pen and listen. Arthur can throw his voice. So I put my ear down by the pen, and here's what it's saying. How could you be down there? How could you be that stupid? Look at you. How did you fall? I can't believe you fell into that sin. Oh my, look at you. Oh, I can see the problems in you. Don't you see that's flesh? And Arthur says, I'm getting sick of it. He wouldn't be able to talk like that if I wasn't holding him. And it falls. And then here comes another one. He said, put your ear down there. And I put my ear down. It says, well, that's what you get for judging people. See what happens to those that judge? You fall down. Look at the mess you are. See what you are? See how all that happens? And he says, I'm sick of that. People begin well and they don't end well because they forget that it's the glory of God that holds them. You're not holding yourself. You're not where you are tonight because you did it. It's because God did it. And ultimately, God was in charge of it. And if you had a great family, praise the Lord. And if you had a rotten family, praise the Lord. God's meant it all for your good in one way or the other. But He's the one that holds us. He's the one that's in charge. And I don't want to sit around judging other people and wondering whether I've done enough of it. I've done it that much myself to the point that I'm scared to death to do it. Because I know I stand here only because God holds me. If I knew me like I knew me, I wouldn't listen to me. I made a lot of mistakes, but I'm not God's mistake. And He's the one that holds me. He's the one that carries me. Arthur told me that he was in Coffs Harbor preaching once. And he said he was making his point. Arthur's a very dominant fellow. When he's preaching, he expects to be heard. He has these little rules. You follow the Arthur rules. You stand up, speak up, shut up. After 5 minutes, if you haven't hit oil, stop boring. That's his rules. And he's speaking, and he's just getting ready to make his point. It's a big meeting, and here's a lady on the second row. All of a sudden, she jumps up just when he's making his key point, steps out in front of everybody, makes them all move their legs, goes up the center aisle, comes back with a newspaper, pushes everybody out of the way, sits there and opens the newspaper up like this in front of him. Then she looks at it for a while, closes it, puts it on the floor in front of her, and jumps up and down doing a little Pentecostal two-step on the newspaper. And in his mind he says, I marked her. I wasn't going to let her get away with that. As soon as the meeting's over, he says, I'll get her and I'll hammer her. Nobody interrupts meetings like that, and I'll put a stop to it. So he has a lot of people come up and they're asking him questions, this and that, this and that, this and that. And he keeps his eye on her because he doesn't want her to leave. He wants to get her. And then before he can get to her, a fellow comes up and says, did you see the lady get up in the middle of the service? He says, yeah. Did you see her go back and get the newspaper? Yeah. He says, what a blessing. He goes, you know what, Arthur? There was just an article in the newspaper about a particular spider that can spit its venom 20 feet. And if it lands on you, it'll kill you. She saw the spider and wasn't sure that was the kind it was. So she raced out and got the newspaper article and brought it back and opened it. And it showed all the markings of the spider on it. And she saw that that was it. So she put the paper on top of it and got on top and jumped on it and killed it. And isn't it a blessing that nobody got hurt? If you judge, you will always, always judge wrongly. You don't know a person's past. You don't know where they're coming from. Now, in a discipleship setting, when I'm counseling people, people have asked me to judge them. And they've given me the information, and I know from where I'm judging. But if you don't know from where you're judging, you will judge wrongly. Now, I told that story just last week in New Zealand at a church. I'd got through preaching at the church, and an elderly lady came up to me, and she didn't agree with this, and she didn't agree with that, and she couldn't see how somebody could have a problem and still go to heaven, and Jesus wouldn't accept them and all that. I preach in the morning, I come back in the afternoon, I tell this story about Arthur, I'm talking about other things. I'm sitting there, and I notice she comes in and sits on a chair in the middle of the aisle. And she has that look on her face. She folds her arms, you've seen it. Bless me if you can. Just bless me if you can. Just try. I don't agree with this. I'm here to sit in judgment. And she sat there through the whole thing, and I thought to myself, why doesn't she just leave? Why would anybody come and do that? Why doesn't she just go away? Why do people come when they don't like what you're saying and sit there and judge you? Well, as soon as I said, amen, that's the end of that session, she's right up the center aisle. I go, here we go again. Mike, I've thought about what you said. I just love your teaching. I've never heard anything like it. I've been sitting back there mulling it around in my head, and it's just so intense. I've never thought this way before. Where are your books? How do I get them? If you judge wrongly. When you judge, you sit on a tree limb and you're sawing on the wrong side. When you throw dirt, you're always losing ground. You'll be wrong in the end. Haman would have never built the gallows if he knew he was going to swing from him. David would have never said to the prophet, bring me the man and I'll wipe him that stole the sheep, if he would have known the prophet was going to turn around and say, you are that man. So as we look at people, we look at their problems, we begin to deal with that. We don't have a heart of judgment. Jesus is coming back, and until he returns, we want to see as many people saved. Not just forgiven and going to heaven, saved as we can.